It began with a single call, one that no one expected, not even Demet Özdemir herself. It was late, nearly midnight in Istanbul, when her phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen on her screen for years, Yaman. For a moment, she froze. Her hand hovered over the phone, her mind racing back through time, through all the laughter, the fights, the silent nights that followed their breakup. Was this real? Or was she imagining it? The world had seen them fall in love on screen, drift apart off screen, and move on with their lives, or so everyone thought. But fate, it seemed, had a way of rewriting endings. When she finally answered, her voice trembled slightly. "Can?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence on the other side of the line, and then his voice, deep and familiar, broke through. "Hi, Demet. I didn't know if you'd pick up." It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for cameras. It was raw, unfiltered emotion. The kind that doesn't fade, no matter how much time has passed. Demet sat down, trying to calm her heartbeat. "It's been a long time," she said carefully. He laughed softly, that same laugh she used to tease him for. "Yeah. Too long." For a few seconds, neither spoke. It was as if the years of silence had suddenly collapsed between them. Somewhere across the city, social media was already buzzing. A fan had caught a glimpse of Ken during a live event earlier that evening. Looking distracted, constantly checking his phone. "Something's off with him tonight," one user posted. Minutes later, a rumor spread, Yaman called Demet Özdemir. No one knew if it was true, but the thought alone was enough to send Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok into a frenzy. Screens lit up worldwide, everyone was asking the same thing: what did he say? Back in her apartment, Demet leaned against the window, her eyes glistening in the city lights. Ken's tone had changed. Softer, calmer, almost apologetic. "I saw something today," he said quietly. "An old interview clip. You said something about people you never forget." Demet closed her eyes. She remembered that interview. She hadn't meant for it to be about him, but of course, it always was. "And," she whispered. Ken hesitated, then said, "I realized I've been pretending for too long." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of everything they hadn't said for years. And somewhere out there, millions of fans refreshed their feeds, unaware that the story they'd been waiting for had just begun. By morning, the rumor had turned into a digital storm. Every major entertainment page, gossip blog, and fan account was posting about the same thing: Yaman's midnight call to Demet Özdemir. Within hours, hashtags like #CanDemetCall, #Unthinkable, and #TheyStillLoveEachOther trended worldwide. Some fans celebrated, others speculated, and a few simply couldn't believe it. Screens were filled with side-by-side pictures of their old scenes, romantic edits, and nostalgic quotes. It was as if the entire world had collectively pressed rewind on their story. Meanwhile, Ken woke up to his phone buzzing non-stop, calls from his manager, notifications, even journalists asking for a comment. But he didn't answer any of them. He just sat on his hotel balcony in Rome, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. The night before hadn't been a stunt or a publicity move. It was something real, something he'd done for himself. "Let them talk," he muttered under his breath. For once, he didn't care what the internet thought. He replayed the call in his head. The way Demet's voice trembled at first, then softened. The silence that said more than words ever could. They hadn't talked about the past or what went wrong. Instead, they'd talked about little things, how their lives had changed, how fame had both blessed and cursed them, how memories still haunted certain places. At one point, she had even laughed, the same laugh that once made him forget the world. That laugh stayed with him through the night. Back in Istanbul, Demet was facing her own wave of headlines. Her team urged her to post something, deny the rumors, control the narrative. But she didn't. She just stared at her reflection, wondering how a single voice could shake everything she thought she'd moved past. She had buried those feelings under years of distance and silence, yet one call had unearthed them all. A close friend texted her, "Is it true?" Demet typed, "He called," then deleted it. Instead, she replied, "Some things don't fade, do they?" Later that day, Ken finally called his mother. She had already heard, of course she had. "You called her," she said, half amused, half emotional. "The whole country knows." He sighed. "It wasn't supposed to be public." She smiled softly on the other end of the line. Maybe it was supposed to happen. What neither of them knew was that, across social media, something unusual was happening. People weren't just gossiping. They were rooting for them. For the first time in years, the world wasn't laughing or judging. It was hoping. By the third day, the story had gone global. International media outlets were picking it up, translating headlines into multiple languages. Ken Yaman's call rekindles flame with Demet Özdemir. Videos from their old interviews resurfaced, clips where they laughed together, looked into each other's eyes a little too long, or blushed when someone mentioned love. It wasn't just nostalgia anymore. It was a revival. But behind all the noise, both of them were in chaos. Demet sat in her apartment, scrolling endlessly through comments. "They belong together, we waited for this for years, please, Ken, don't break her heart again." The support was overwhelming, but it terrified her too. Fame had once destroyed what was pure between them. Could it do the same again? Meanwhile, in Rome, Ken couldn't escape the headlines. Every restaurant he went to, every fan he met, someone mentioned the call. Even his director teased him on set, "So, Mr. Yaman, the world says you called your destiny." He smiled politely, but his mind wasn't on work anymore. That night, he sat alone on his hotel bed, scrolling through Demet's latest post, a simple photo of a sunset with the caption, "Some calls change everything." His heart skipped. Was it for him? He hesitated for hours, then finally typed a message, "Can we talk again? Not as actors. Just as us." Then he put his phone down and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. Until finally, a reply, "Come to Istanbul." Some things shouldn't be said over the phone. The next morning, Ken's assistant was confused when he cancelled all his meetings. "Are you going somewhere?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Home." On social media, fans noticed he'd landed in Turkey before anyone else did. Photos of him at the airport flooded timelines. Rumors exploded, "He's going to see her." Paparazzi camped outside Demet's building, reporters waited at the airport. It was madness, but for once, both of them ignored the chaos. As the sun set over Istanbul that evening, Ken stood outside Demet's door. For a moment, he hesitated, just like she had before answering his call. Then, finally, he knocked. The world waited, screens glowing, hearts racing. But inside, it was just two people, one heartbeat, and a silence about to be broken. When Demet opened the door, neither of them spoke. It was one of those moments where time seemed to stretch, when 1,000 memories rush in all at once. She looked the same, yet completely different. Her eyes still had that same spark, but there was also maturity, calmness, maybe even sadness. Ken stood there, unsure of what to say. "Hi," he finally whispered. She smiled faintly. "You came." He nodded. "You told me to." The air between them was thick with everything they hadn't said for years. For a few seconds, it felt awkward, two strangers trying to remember how they used to fit together. Then Demet stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the apartment was quiet, warm, filled with faint music. He noticed a framed photo on the shelf, from Erkenci Kes days, both of them laughing in costume. "You kept that?" he asked softly. She shrugged. "Some things you don't throw away, no matter how much time passes." They sat across from each other, the silence comforting and heavy at the same time. "You didn't answer my message right away," he said. "I wasn't sure if I should," she replied. "Why did you call me, Ken?" He exhaled slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because I saw that interview again. The one where you said, you never really forget the people who change you. Demet looked down. I meant it. He leaned forward. Then maybe I just wanted to know if I was still one of them. She smiled sadly. You were never just one of them. You were the one. For a moment, neither of them moved. The words hung between them, fragile and real. Can's voice broke slightly when he said, I thought I could bury it all, the feelings, the regrets, under work, distance, time. But every time I saw your name, it hurt. Demet's eyes filled with tears. And you think a phone call fixes that? She asked quietly. No, he said. But maybe it starts something. Something honest. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, saw the same man she'd once loved, but stripped of pride and fame. You called me at midnight, she whispered, half smiling. You always did have terrible timing. He laughed softly, relief in his voice. Maybe this time, it's the right kind of terrible. As the night went on, the city outside pulsed with lights and noise, but in that small apartment, time stood still. No cameras, no headlines, no scripts, just two people rediscovering the courage to speak their truth. The next morning, Istanbul woke up to chaos once again. Paparazzi at every corner, fans live streaming outside Demet's building, and journalists asking the same burning question, are they back together? Overnight, someone had leaked a photo of Can leaving her apartment just before dawn. It wasn't staged. It wasn't even clear, just a blurry shot of him smiling, but it was enough. Within hours, the internet was on fire again. Demet's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her team panicked, her manager begged her to release a statement, but she didn't. She just sat in silence, watching the news anchors dissect her private life all over again. Her chest felt tight, the same pressure she'd felt years ago when fame had first come between them. She didn't want to relive it. Not again. Then her phone buzzed, a message from Can. Don't say anything. Let them talk. We'll handle this our way. It was calm, protective, almost like the old days. Something in those words steadied her. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Can was facing a different kind of conversation, with his mother. Goldem had seen the headlines, too. She called him early, her voice warm but serious. You always did make things difficult, didn't you? He smiled faintly, rubbing the back of his neck. It wasn't planned, Mom. She laughed softly. You think love ever is? Then, more gently, she said, you know, I used to worry about you. You were strong, successful, but empty. Since that night you called her, I hear something different in your voice. Ken fell silent. You're not angry? He asked. Angry, she repeated, almost amused. No, my son. I'm proud. Proud that you finally stopped running. He exhaled, relief washing over him. So, you're saying you approve? Goldem chuckled. I'm saying what every mother says when she sees her child happy, it's about time. Back online, fans noticed something remarkable. Instead of denying or hiding, both Can and Demet posted photos the same day, not together, but with the same caption, some stories don't end, they pause. It was all the confirmation the world needed. That night, news programs replayed clips of their reunion, talk shows debated whether it was real, and millions of fans filled comment sections with hearts and crying emojis. Even celebrities joined in, calling it the comeback of the year. But for Can and Demet, it wasn't about social media anymore. It was about finally breathing again. As Can looked out over the Bosphorus from his balcony that night, he smiled to himself. The noise, the chaos, the speculation, none of it mattered. What mattered was the voice that had answered the phone that night, and the woman who hadn't hung up. The following evening, Istanbul seemed to breathe a little differently. The chaos of headlines, rumors, and debates was still roaring online, but in one quiet home overlooking the Bosphorus, the truth was unfolding in silence. Ken had gone to see his mother, something he hadn't done in weeks. When she opened the door, he saw the warmth in her eyes before she said a word. So, she smiled knowingly, you finally did the unthinkable. He laughed softly. You heard. She raised an eyebrow. The whole world heard. Then her tone softened. But I'm not angry. I'm happy you finally stopped pretending you don't miss her. Ken sat beside her, the city lights shimmering through the window. I didn't plan it, Mom. I just called. She placed her hand over his. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. Just then, her phone buzzed, a notification from a news app. The headline read, Unthinkable? Ken Yaman's call to Demet Özdemir sets the internet on fire. She smiled and looked at him. They got one thing right, it was unthinkable. Until you did it. Later that night, Demet posted a short video on her Instagram story, a dimly lit skyline, her voice in the background saying softly, sometimes, a single call can bring two hearts back to the same frequency. Within minutes, millions had viewed it. Fans flooded the comments with tears, hearts, and words like finally, destiny, and we never stopped believing. Ken watched the clip from his phone, a quiet smile spreading across his face. He didn't repost it, didn't comment, didn't make any statement. He simply turned off the screen and looked out over the water. His mother walked in and stood beside him, silent for a moment. You know what I think, she said. It's time you stopped letting the world define your story. He turned to her, and for a moment, the little boy in him resurfaced, the one who used to seek her approval for everything. Do I have your blessing, then? He asked gently. She smiled, eyes glistening. You've always had it. Outside, the city lights reflected in the water like stars, and for the first time in years, both Ken and Demet seemed to breathe in sync, two souls, once separated by pride and distance, now finding their way back with nothing more than a single, unthinkable call. And as the internet kept burning with hashtags, theories, and endless speculations, one truth remained untouched: sometimes, love doesn't end. It just waits for the courage to dial again.